part of the reason you and I are so fucked up right now. Society is a shit show. Everything's falling apart. Nothing works properly anymore is because people play follow the fucking leader. And they will repeat anything if the moral majority is on board with it, which is to say, all repetition is ritual. And all ritual or repetition down the line becomes normalization, which means you're familiar with it, which means you accept it without questioning it. In other words, people don't look into things, they buy into them. This is in reference to somebody shopping around social engineering jargon. This is what I'm leaving on here, and they'll probably block me or fucking freak out, and or somebody who isn't thinking for themselves, and you and I are surrounded by that. Surrounded by people that fall into that category will leave me some social engineering stickers, or make a superficial assumption about my life to try to take a dig at me, even though they're dumber than a fucking bucket of marbles, and it really isn't. If you and I are surrounded by all these fucking morons, it doesn't really matter if one moron says something against my character. Especially when I don't know them and they don't know me and they're incapable of research and abstract thought, so it's definitely not founded in, something that reflects reality. It's not going to keep me up at night. Wish it didn't make that noise. Alright. As it reads, there's nothing wrong with being gay and or some of the straight people I know who cross-dress. It's a thing. It's not a commonplace thing. It's a percentage, but it's a thing. It's, it falls into deviant behavior and or some wires are crossed. Typically speaking. Because if that wasn't the case, you and I wouldn't be here because it's a binary system. That's what I'm basing that on. I'm basing it on how everything fucking functions and why it functions well, if you appreciate what reflects reality. So back to point. The issue at hand is social engineering jargon. Specifically, we started calling food organic, which opened up the door to genetically modified poison. This is the example I use often because most people are fucking stupid. The same applies to pretending that dogs are cats and cats are dogs. What I'm driving at is cross-dressing isn't a gender. Cross-dressing isn't a race of people. Using the social engineering jargon reaffirms an agenda brought to you by the Tavistock Institute, directly related to eugenics. And this is where the dots would have led if people were capable of connecting dots. But it does not come up. And the kids who will read some of this and, loosely think about it or superficially glance over the words and get their panties in a bunch and not be able to sleep tonight, cry themselves to sleep, run for the hills, and or bark at me, they will wax poetic. They will dress this up in an absurd way that doesn't reflect reality, based on semantics and assumptions and belief systems and horse shit, to try to justify the fact that they are promoting an agenda, to try to justify the fact that they reacted, they had to contact me because they didn't like what I left online, because what I left online fucking reflects reality. And it is rooted in logic if you think about it. Back to point. People would know this if they looked into things instead of buying into them. Unfortunately, that's not how things work in superficial society. But if it was, you and I would be better off. Read what I left on here. Think about what I left on here, which is to say research instead of reacting. Now, damn near everybody who sees this in this feed, keep in mind, this is a porn star who posted this. Most people are going to react poorly. Probably no one who sees this, most likely no one who sees this will probably look into any of it. Because it requires abstract thought. You would have to put in time and energy. You would have to try to figure something out. And if you Google it, Google's going to lie to you. Google's not going to tell you a goddamn thing. Google is not a search engine. It's a tool of propaganda. The golden days of the internet are over. They are long since over. And that should be painfully obvious, but most things aren't. The fact that there are community guidelines and things are censored and fill in the fucking blank and most people can't because we have, censorship, quote unquote, culture. We slap another word in there and instead of calling it censorship, we call it something else to dress it up as something that it's not so that you buy into it. Not unlike my example or analogy having to do with organic. And the same applies to the subject matter at hand. Again, rooted in logic. But most people are incapable of connecting the dots. As always, what the fuck do I know? Here's the post. This is propaganda. This is disinformation. This is what our masters want you to repeat. This is why you and I still have access to the internet. Because we do not pose a threat to our masters. Another thing, most people haven't figured this out. If you look at the Davos panel, it's the public forum, the flip side of the Bilderberg group, which is the private forum, so to speak, where our masters get together and they decide what they're going to do with us because we are slaves, we are debt slaves. We're on the cusp of becoming social credit slaves. Most people haven't figured that out, but most people support Bitcoin, digital currency. They promote AI. They don't have a problem with drones. They aren't fucking thinking for themselves. They're promoting numerous agendas, all of which are part of an umbrella in place to subjugate you and I. It's a problem, but you would have to think about it in order to understand that, in order to appreciate what I've been saying online. I was going to just leave it as is. But again, people can't connect the fucking dots. I've said this many times over, and most people don't see these things because I'm systematically censored. But here. AOL discs were free. Sign up for a cell phone plan and get a free cell phone. Social media is free. If you thought about this, the Davos panel openly stated in a public transcript, which is still available to the masses, but people don't research, that you and I were given numerous forms of communication to echo narratives that our masters cooked up. They wrote adult fairy tales. And the plan was to do this annually and to leave them on the internet for you and I to repeat without thinking. And now it's ramping up because the goal is control and our masters are locking things down. Most people haven't figured out that democracy is a shade of fascism because the Republic fell during the Civil War and was finalized in 1871 when the Organic Act turned America into a fucking corporation, effectively creating the District of Columbia. People should know this. It's relevant to the fact that you and I, if we identify as citizens, if you were born in the States, you have a birth certificate, you have a straw man, you're leveraged on the fucking stock market, you and I are not fucking free. We do have masters. If you have a W-2 and you go to a goddamn job and somebody else is taking a percentage out of your fucking paycheck, that means you work for them. You've probably never met them, you probably don't know who they are, but you fucking work for them. It's a second party stealing from us that we work for. You and I put bread on our masters' tables. To connect some other dots for you, I'm referring to the black nobility, which is connected to the royal family. It has to do with their crest. It should come up, doesn't come up, because America's a vassal state of the crown. It's a crown colony. America's the bottom of the trilateral city-states. And when I say crown, I'm also referring to the top of the trilateral city-states, which is a banking financial central. It's called the Crown, it's called the City, and it's located in the UK. It's symbolically represented by Cleopatra's Needle, which is an obelisk. The bottom of the trilateral city-states, having to do with the District of Columbia, is symbolically represented by the Washington Monument. And in between both of those is the Catholic Church in Rome at the Vatican. Each one of these are the three city-states. And you should look up the name or try to figure out if it has a name, is how I used to always rattle it off. The obelisk associated with the Vatican. It's very telling. If you've ever seen Clockwork Orange, you know, the main actor, Malcolm McDowell? No, is that his name? I think so. McDowell, that doesn't sound right. Malcolm. Either way. If you look up the dude that starred in Clockwork Orange, he starred in another movie that you'll be able to connect the dots with, superficially speaking, if you look up the name of the obelisk at the Vatican in Rome. It's very telling. But again, what the fuck do I know? This information's available to you. Why are you and I surrounded by idiots? People are so concerned about, superficially concerned that the world is on fire and everything's bad and I'm unhappy and blah, blah, blah. But they're not willing to do the right thing. Ironically, they're repeating fucking horseshit that's fucking them up and you and I. I'm urging you to do better, as all the fucking retards like to repeat out there. But again, what the fuck do I know?